how do I cope with change? I just always going back to that why.
We are also transforming ourselves throughout the change.
And it's interesting because you need equal amounts of humility as well as trust in yourself, and to be able to be stable and comfortable with the unknown and in the unknown. Systems change is really the premise and the recognition that things are interconnected as well as dependent on one another. That can be an infrastructural system, a social system, even an emotional system. There are levels of thinking and levels of action that underpin the structures of society that we live in.
Yeah.
So if our goal is to tackle and address the root causes of something, we need to get to not the tip of the iceberg, but what's below the surface. From there, we can talk about Donella Meadows and leverage points, which are, again, systemic, they're mental, they're financial, they're cultural, they're behavioral. In permaculture, for example, and in many new areas of thinking that work towards regeneration, is this idea of abundance, is this idea that the yields can be infinite. And it's a design principle as well as design invitation.
What would change if we would be in an abundance-based system?
In short, for me, it would change what we value and it would change how we assign value to something. And so that the outcomes are ultimately regenerative.
Hi, and welcome back to New World in the Making, the podcast where we question the systems that we come from, try to make sense of the world that we're living in right now, and look into what's emerging. Today, I'm talking with Melina Dunham, a founder of Zymosi, curator of the Ministry of Regeneration at the House of Beautiful Business Forum. It's going to happen in May, and a powerful voice in systems change. This conversation goes deep into systems thinking. We explore the Iceberg model, Donella Meadows' leverage points, and where we actually need to intervene if we want real change. We talk about the forces pulling old systems down and the forces pulling the new world into being. We look at old narratives that need to die and new ones that are emerging, and we explore how change happens beneath the surface, why scarcity is such a limiting lens, and how new ways of gathering, relating, and organizing can help shape a more resilient world. This was a very personal conversation about systems, hope, and what it means to navigate polycrises as a millennial, building something new. So, let's dive in. Melina, thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you, Adriana, for having me.
We are already recording second time, and I'm really excited actually we're doing this because, there's so much to dive into and so much for us to uncover. Could you, before we go into climate change, climate work, systems change, and all that, could you share your story and give a bit of a background of who you are and what shaped you to become the person you're in today?
Thank you for that question. And it's a delight to be speaking with you again as well. So there are so many ways to answer that question, but I am first generation Greek American. I was born and raised in San Francisco, and through academia and then my professional life, slowly made my way to Athens, which I now call home for the past 5 years. My academic career, but really from a much younger age, I really was drawn to the world of human rights, politics, international affairs, which is what I ended up studying, which took me to the UN. And where I landed now is really in this area of what it means to be a climate citizen. That's a lot of work that I've been doing, and I've been doing that through the vehicles of philanthropy, now through the lens of systems change and regenerative principles and systems. But I love to dance. I love food.
That too. Okay, so you're already mentioning climate citizens and systems change. Maybe, can you go a bit into what would you define as a climate citizen, and what are you working on right now?
Yeah. So climate citizenship is really the awareness as well as structures that facilitate all of us to contribute to protecting the planet that we are fortunate to call home. And there are so many ways that that happens, and it's through advocacy work, it's through direct action work, it's through civil society organizations, through education, through the act of voting and really practicing your civic rights. But it's really, my goal is to just bring attention to the fact that we all have a role to play. And there are so many levers that we can activate in our path towards, do we want to call it net zero? Do we want to call it a regenerative system? Call it sustainability? All of those nuances of language are interesting to dive into, but just really that recognition and call to action that we all have our part to play through our professional realm, where our money goes, how we spend our time, what we read, who we talk to, how we vote, how we show up for and contribute to our local, national, global communities. So
Wow.
that's what I think of as climate citizenship.
Mm. I would love to go back to that question as well, because I'd love to, look into, okay, so actually, what are the practical things that we can do in more detail? For instance, maybe somebody that is just right out of university or something, and it's like, what are we doing? So yeah, maybe actually, can you go into that, because I feel that we were just talking. We are both 30 and we are both millennials that kind of just we're sold this idea of just go out there, get a nice job, and you're gonna also have an impact, and you're gonna be financially stable, and it's gonna be great. And reality, just I don't know, um, a lot of us just, well, struggle maybe with that a bit. So in a more practical way, what would you say for us as our generation, but also more younger generations that are maybe struggling even more right now, finding their way with AI and all these dooming questions, and also with climate change, and then being a climate partisan?
Yeah, it's true. There's definitely a lot of attention to the fact that our generation, we have grown up in this world of polycrises. Yes, we were younger before social media was so present and such a norm. So we kind of remember everything before that, but we're fluent. We're tech natives. So how that means that we kind of scrutinize where we're going and scrutinize these developments, I think is really exciting.
Yeah.
But as you said, it's also quite scary because the norms, never mind the cost of living, never mind the instability of job markets that is very different to that which our parents experienced, we're also grappling because it's changing so frequently now. But it is true that this idea of, and it's a beautiful thing to see that we and younger generations are thinking about impact and thinking about the ways in which, where we spend our time, what we do professionally, goes beyond making ends meet, so to speak. And something that I've offered to groups and teams, something that I think about is really this, it's one of those Venn diagrams of what you're good at, what you like to do, and how you want to contribute. And so that intersection is very telling. So that again can be professionally, it can also be about how you spend your free time. And it brings a lot to the surface about creative ways that we show up and creative ways to be a climate citizen. As well as highlighting that, again, like I said before, we all have a part to play. And that you don't need to be a climate scientist. You don't always need to be working directly in um, CSR or sustainability to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very, very important aspect that you're highlighting there. And especially in the AI world where we feel now maybe even less agency and less power over all these new different tools. Okay, so moving on to a bit of what are you working on right now and how are you integrating that being a climate citizen and this regenerative and sustainability work in your in your work in your day to day?
Yeah, I am right now contributing to a few different projects, which is incredibly nourishing. So I'm part of the team that is building out an urban climate lab in Greece, and the project is called Kali Polis, which means good city. So really highlighting the power and role that local governance and local and municipalities have to play, and creating a direct pipeline between young people and local government to act on climate priorities and really build local resilience. I'm curating the Ministry of Regeneration for the World Beautiful Business Forum, which is being put together by the House of Beautiful Business and will be held here in May, which is really exciting. And again, that is the guiding question is how do we flourish and how do we create a life-centered economy in a more than human world? You mentioned AI, so thinking about all of those implications for business, for how we gather, and for how we shape where we're going. I am also building a venture of my own called Zymosi, which means fermentation in Greek, and is really my way of channeling those exact questions of where do we go? How can we do better? And leaning into the experience that I have in philanthropy in Greece and my experience and understanding of systems change to really encourage and create a space where people doing this work in Greece can gather in a different way, in a slow way, by breaking bread together and sharing them.
Okay, there are so many questions here. First of all, okay, let's go into the gatherings and how you bring people together over a shared meal. I love the name and the meaning of it, fermentation. I find it very inspiring. What have you, how does it work and what have you learned so far doing those gatherings?
So the way that it works is I curate a group of 7 to 12 people that are people that I know. As of right now, I'm getting started. Down the line, it will. I hope that it does grow to be to reach people that I don't know. But I curate a group of people that bring different areas of expertise, different perspectives, different opinions, but that are all really committed to seeing Greece flourish and that are committed to climate work and that ultimately just care. We all care, but that is an active part of their work. So I curate that group of people, and the one fun variable is that they don't know each other and they don't know who they're having dinner with until they arrive the evening of. And what then unfolds is I guide the group through a facilitated conversation that focuses on a topic that either relates to the season that we're in, if there's a specific, let's say, national holiday or a moment of time, as well as the relevance of the space to focus us on a topic and to allow people to share of themselves in a way that is not explicitly professional, but that builds trust. To me, this is Zymosi and fermentation is about surrendering to the slow but active work that we need to rebuild trust in the larger impact space. And focusing on philanthropy is part of that, but it goes beyond that. So what have I learned?
Yeah.
I have learned that people really crave this. It has been incredibly encouraging to see that this type of engagement and these spaces for genuine, authentic, unscripted, non-hierarchical connection are really needed. And that people are thirsty to have these types of conversations that are thoughtful and substantive, but also a little bit provocative and unexpected. And just really being excited to get to know people and see what emerges from there. So there's a really big need, which I'm really proud of and excited to lean into.
No, that's very exciting. And all the connections that can come out of that. No, it's just, yeah, very interesting to see. Okay, so this is actively system shaping and actively system connecting. And yeah, ultimately just system work. I mean, we've talked so much about systems. Can you explain for somebody that doesn't really know what we're talking about in the realm of systems change, maybe the iceberg model, some sort of techniques and tools that are very common in this space?
Yeah. So systems change is really the premise and the recognition that things are interconnected as well as dependent on one another. That can be an infrastructural system, a social system, even an emotional system. And so systems change starts with that recognition to then ask the question, so how do we change towards, often it's implied, something better? And there are so many tools, and there are decades of literature and research on this that I am still familiarizing myself with, to be quite frank. But it has opened up a whole new vocabulary and toolbox for me to understand to do it. You start with this mapping of understanding, okay, if this is a challenge that I want to target, if this is something I want to change, understanding who's involved, understanding what that ecosystem looks like, then understanding and identifying what the layers and levers of change are. So you mentioned the iceberg model as one, and the iceberg model is the recognition that there are levels of thinking and levels of action that underpin, honestly, the structures and society and the structures of society that we live in.
Yeah.
So if our goal is to tackle and address the root causes of something,
Yeah.
we need to get to not the tip of the iceberg, but what's below the surface. So the layers are, you witness an event. The layer below that is you recognize that there's a pattern that causes that event. Below that, you have the structure that creates this pattern that enables this event to occur. But the core of it is the mental model. So the mental model is recognizing what behaviors, what mindsets, what norms and values this system exists in. And so saying that's what we need to tackle. From there, we can talk about Donnell Meadows and leverage points, which are again systemic. They are mental, they are financial, they are cultural, they are behavioral. And so this realm of systems change is just, it's tools. It's tools and frameworks that can be applied to any context of work to bring about change.
Yeah, I love the iceberg model, I have to say.
Yeah.
Obsessed with this.
It appears everywhere. And once you get to know it, um, it's really helpful.
Yeah. No, because also it's just this the way that we think, how that affects everything, the way that we perceive things, the way that we value things, the way that yeah, we just grew up with this narrative or belief system and view of things. And something that I loved that you shared in the last recording we did was related to a belief system related to scarcity and abundance, and how we, just were raised in a belief system in a very much scarcity based system and structured around scarcity. So, could you explain this further? And where does abundance play into this?
I love that question. So if we think about the systems that we exist in, where we define air, water, as natural resources, that assigns to them a value and therefore something that can be extracted. That's one element. We also exist in um, economic systems that depend upon supply and demand and that associate value to scarcity. So in permaculture, for example, and in many new areas of thinking that work towards regeneration, is this idea of abundance, is this idea that the yields can be infinite. And it's a design principle as well as design invitation. Because when we recognize that there is in fact bounty, and when we recognize that the more that one individual species ecosystem benefits, the better off all the surrounding individuals, species, ecosystems, and therefore global collective are, the better. And so leaning into that, not only personally just has allowed me to see a lot more beauty even in the day to day, but has very much informed relationships in terms of understanding that things are mutually beneficial is a way that I like to think about it, and is for me what it comes down to.
I love
And
this.
designing towards that.
Because it's so far from what we usually think, right? It's so funny because there's this counterintuitive thing of, we think as everything is scarce and is limited in a way, and that's why we get value out of those things. But then we want infinite growth in a capitalist system. But at the same time, actually, the whole premise of everything is that it's not scarce, it's actually abundant. So if we part from that, then all the infinite growth doesn't make any sense anymore. I don't know if I'm explaining this right now, but how do you think is this mindset shift, this paradigm shift that you're just explaining here about actually everything is abundant? um, how does that change everything else? How is that the leverage point? And what would change if we would be in an abundant based system?
There are many dimensions to that, and I think that there are a lot of people focusing on this. But in short, for me, it would change what we value, uh, and it would change how we assign value to something. Be it a natural resource, be it power dynamics, be it hierarchies, ultimately to understand that things need to be more horizontal, and that we need to design for less waste. We need to design for in a more circular model, so that things reinforce one another, and so that the feedback loops are different, and so that the outcomes are ultimately regenerative. Yeah.
Yeah. You're also a host and a speaker at the forum of House of Beautiful Business. I just checked. You have 5 panel discussions, speeches, and moments that you are on stage. Can you share what are you going to be talking about? What are the topics? And more in more detail, maybe.
Sure. So within the realm of the World Beautiful Business Forum, like I said, I'm curating the Ministry of Regeneration track. So it's really using that big term to unpack alternative economic models, to unpack what it means to design a um, life-centered economy, what it means to reconsider AI in the context of the climate, um, and how we need to go back to, or not go back to, but focus on the inner transformation to enable the systems change. So it will be a combination of conversations that will kind of map out different elements of a life-centered economy. We will be hosting I will be curating a really fun gamified stock exchange session where we'll look at different frameworks and models for systems change. We're going to talk about how climate and storytelling play a really important part into working towards a regenerative future, and also thinking about designing for and with the climate. There will be a focus session on climate and AI, so understanding the infrastructural and design implications of AI in data centers, understanding the tools and playing around with the tools that are also really powerful for advocacy and mindset shifts to again raise that awareness, as well as understanding just how much data is out there and how it can be leveraged for climate focused, climate prioritized decision making and policies. And then, like I said, nourishment and rewilding. So thinking about never mind the grief and what we need to let go of a use of the old system, leaning into the risk as well as beautiful opportunities of a new system, which can feel wild because it is unknown. But really going back to the fact that all of this strives towards realigning and restoring our relationship to nature is ultimately what it comes down, and everything building from that.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a beautiful initiative, such a beautiful proposition. And I love to hear that, and that we're going into that direction, thinking about those things and proposing things. I wonder a lot of these times that I'm hearing this, and I mean, in my master's, we talked a lot about this as well. But then there is always this aspect of money. um, who's paying for that? And is there capital being invested into going and do these kind of research projects and come up with new solutions? How are we going to get to those scenarios? Because usually money is right now not being really maybe put into those spaces. So maybe you have some inside perspective on that, talking to investors, philanthropists, just all these people that are interested in seeing this, but also interested in maybe living in this still money-driven economy.
There's a bit of both, in the sense that the way that any form of financial institution, the way that traditional finance, the way that philanthropy um, evaluate risk
Yeah.
is ultimately what this comes down to. So returns and time horizons of investments, considerations for growth, and meeting particular targets. And so that that remains. What we are seeing though is that is changing. There are all types of, let's say, funding vehicles, and streams that are being built out and that are prioritizing this type of work, because ultimately we're depending on resources that are finite, and we know that are incredibly, um, what's the word, that are subject to geopolitical risk, as we're seeing right now. Um, and so I think it's happening. The body of research on regenerative finance and climate finance is only growing, and that is being absorbed and considered by, again, traditional finance. It takes time. It takes time, but there's no silver bullet, and this isn't something that, and it needs kind of those pressures from both directions, so top
Yeah.
down as well as bottom up.
And I was wondering, because this is also something that I've always struggled with, is the frustration. How do you deal with that? Because it's a space that's very slow usually. That's what you just said, no? That depending also the country, the capital you have, all these things. Yeah, how do you keep going? How do you keep the momentum going? And yeah, just how do you not give up on, like, well, that's that then.
Think that is a question, and that's something that everyone working in this space faces and grapples. And I would say that there are a few elements. Um, Recognizing that this work is incredibly, you said just transition. There are so many components to that, and I appreciate, and it's really nice to just, let's say, figuratively kind of look up and see how many people are doing this work, um, is really powerful.
Yeah.
So I take comfort in just the number and the
Mm,
size
yeah,
of people that are thinking about this and doing this and really trying. Um, Zymosi, my project, is also a way that I feed and maintain hope. Because it's something that it's an opportunity for me to create something, which I think is really, which has been really nourishing. I try to also filter what information I absorb, thinking about the news that I'm reading, thinking about the sources that I look to for such information, is part of that, as well as leaning into the the arts and the creative space and how all of that plays into this. Um, Art and community mobilization and storytelling are also really, really powerful uh, sources of hope.
beautiful. I guess we will need that now more than ever as well. Because yeah, I mean, what we're seeing right now with Iran and the whole situation there, I just read something today about all the prices not even, yeah, being like that, we don't see any effect yet because we're still living on the oil that was shipped throughout all these other months before. Yeah, we haven't even seen the shock yet. I would love to hear your perspective on this. Greece got very, very, like, a big hit by the '08 financial crisis. Uh, can we learn from past crises? And yeah, how do we navigate this? Is there something that you have an insight of and would like to share?
Goodness. the things that I will touch on are that we are talking about the implications of the closures of the Straits of Hormuz on the food system, on global food security, which is really scary, and has such a direct impact on livelihoods, at a scale much greater, honestly, and I think much more long term,
Hmm.
than we're considering. So to me, that's something that's quite significant. When it comes to crisis management, and it's one thing to consider an economic crisis versus war, and geopolitical crises and instability. Those are handled uh, differently and have different implications because heads of state are also different, and the realm and norms of, let's say, the liberal order have significantly shifted.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I can say, uh, when it comes to the like what this such multi-layered geopolitical crisis is revealing to us is that we need to design resilient systems. And so that means we need to think differently about scale. We need to think differently about flows of resources. We need to think differently about redundance, because specialization and redundance uh, create very different outcomes, and a resilient system has redundancy so that shocks aren't felt as significantly. So that's what I'll say on there.
Interesting. I love that perspective because also it connects for me to decentralization, which is also something that I've been seeing in the podcast more and more coming through the idea of decentralization, right? Okay.
Exactly, exactly. Uh,
Because like, yeah, in the end, like also these crises and not just crises, what you just said, wars and just yeah, humanitarian crises, horrors, um, those are ultimately bringing us toward this whole shift even further and actually being way more interested in going into sustainability and regenerative solutions because it is locally way more accessible. It is way more cost effective. Like it's just very yeah. It's a massive paradox, right? That like the worst things are actually bringing us into the better scenarios and better futures.
hopefully there's to bring it back to systems change, there's what's called the two loop model, which really highlights that to achieve innovation and for a new system to emerge, the old system, you have to grieve the old system, but there are elements of it that you take from it. Um, and so it is very much a pivotal moment. Um, and being able to capture that and channel that for redesign uh, requires a significant amount of political will. It requires a significant amount of shifting resource flows, um, and everything else beneath that. Um, yeah.
You were mentioning now, okay, it requires resilience and it requires inner transformation um, to manage this change and all the crisis and yeah, this massive transformation. So it is a just transformation. How do we manage change? How are we managing our fears? How do we do that?
There's no one answer, and that looks uh that changes by person, but I think um creating space for grief, and creating space for recognizing what is lost and what is uncomfortable is really important. Doing this work in community is also really, really important. And building in safety mechanisms, let's say, personal, professional, systemic. Um,
How do we do that?
I have the answer to that
Yeah,
question.
that's great. No, that's great. I mean, we are
Yeah.
in the middle of building it, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly. Exactly.
mhm.
Uh,
And how do you do that personally? How do you cope with change? I mean, it doesn't have to be something dramatically changing, but yeah, how do you do that?
how do I cope with change? Journaling is really important for me. My community is really, really important, as part of that. Um, and then I just always going back to that why, the why of either what I'm letting go of, what I'm working towards, what I want to be doing, what I want to see flourish. Like that why is important for me.
Yeah, that's very, very beautiful because that kind of grounds us, right, through the whole changing of
Exactly.
everything else, right? How hanging on to something that keeps and is steady.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's very beautiful because, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people can resonate with that and can use that as like, yeah, I for sure can resonate with that. So, yeah, and I don't know, like I feel like constant change is the only constant thing that there is. So,
Right. Yeah, I mean that's true, and there's also significant power in recognizing the impermanence of all of that. Um, yeah,
yeah,
and also I think just remembering that, to think about the planetary level, and how resilient the planet is, how long change takes. Um, yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
but what about you?
I honestly, I recently read something about a. She's called Dr. Maya something. I forgot, and she just wrote a book on the other side of change, I think it's called. And I thought it was very inspiring because what she comes to say is, well, one of her theses at least, is that we're going to be different people managing that change. So right now it looks very scary and it's dooming, right? But then we are also transforming ourselves throughout the change. So we will be able to manage those things when the time is right. So I thought that was such a beautiful idea because it's so true. I experienced this so many times, right? That every time that you think about, oh my gosh, what's going to change? And then once you're inside of the change, maybe you're not even realizing then, but afterwards you're like, oh, but I managed and I came out of it. And I'm like, oh, and I grew so much and I learned so much. And I'm actually really glad that this happened. And um I'm there growing with the change. So I thought that was a very beautiful one. And then I really resonated with what you said about the connecting to your why. And I always feel like trusting in something bigger than ourselves. And then that also is like, okay, that is something I'm not really understanding fully, but I just gotta trust my instinct, my intuition, my feeling that I need to go that way. And it's gonna work out in one way or another. Maybe really not what I would think as this is the right way that this should work out for me. But yeah, for instance, like the podcast happened like that, and if everything would have worked out the way that I thought it would work out for me, we would not be sitting here and talking about this. So, so I'm actually glad that it didn't work out for me and that things changed and that I was at the worst moment, and professionally I was just super lost. And I'm now very glad that all that happened. So we are here, because otherwise, we
Yeah.
wouldn't be. So in that way, I think, it's also a lot about how our ideas and mental ideas just are shuffled around and just like, well, actually, you have no idea. So a bit of humbleness, right? Like being humble about this.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely that's so true. The and it's interesting because you have to balance, not balance, but you need equal amounts of humility as well as trust in yourself. And to be able to be stable and comfortable with the unknown and in the unknown.
Yeah.
Um and and that's such an important part of resilience as well, as you said, so that yeah.
Yeah.
Um
That's a very beautiful one. Like that, being comfortable with the unknown and knowing that you can navigate that even if it's unknown, and being very flexible on that. Also, that you don't have to be right to be able to cope with it, and to be able to hold and be present. And yeah. Yeah. Do you feel that as a woman, we have even more challenges with that, being in a society where it's maybe because from personal experience, I encountered a lot of, just a lot of dismissing me asking questions, or me being the naive little woman that was just the little girl there, that, well, it's not, she has some power flower ideas, but like, let's go back to reality and these kind of things. Um, I was wondering, have you felt like this sometimes? Did you encounter that?
yeah. Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, the subtle as well as very loud ways that patriarchal systems, beliefs, um, misogynistic behaviors, absorbed norms manifest in the day to day, in the professional sphere, as well as in never mind how that shows up in what it means to be a young professional, um, and how you compensate or show up in a space. But also, it's so deeply entrenched into the way our systems are designed, and how decisions are made. Um, I have a friend from undergrad that is doing a lot of work on the matriarchy. So thinking about matriarchal design and norms and values that are holistic, that are dynamic, that are caring and adaptable and resilient and healing, and more circular instead of structured, linear, hierarchical. And of course, you need both. That is why we see yin and yang. That is why there there is a role and need and space for both. Something I think a lot about is just how the feminine um, is and is not present in today.
Yeah. 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 I mean,
Never mind, never mind. I mean, never mind the personal dimensions of that and the daily experiences. And I went to an all women's college for my for university, where we really we spoke to that, and we gave voice and space to what we need for leaders. What does it mean to be a young woman professional? What does it mean to, um, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What are all of the biases? What are all of the unspoken narratives and assumptions, that we have to undo?
yeah. What was one
Uh,
that was surprising to you? That was like, or that you experienced yourself as well, and they were like, "Ooh."
well, there's this interesting, the way that I mean, the irony is that 50% of the population still is considered a minority, and the way that that plays out in particularly, let's say, C-suite, like the way that that plays out at the C-suite level where you have women fighting for one seat. And so what that means and how that compromises women to women relationships. Uh, that kind of, that dynamic is something that, we talked a lot about,
Yeah,
and how we need to rebalance that with sisterhood and solidarity, and really calling out what
yeah.
where the power needs to shift.
Yeah, because oof, like women competing can be quite
Yeah.
ugly. Yeah, not
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. That's a very interesting one. What
Yeah.
has been something that recently surprised you?
Um, what has recently surprised me is just how, I don't know, I think people are getting much more comfortable with vocalizing what we're craving and what we're yearning for. I think we've reached this point where it's like we're all kind of like waking up and looking at one another,
Yeah,
uh, which is really nice because sometimes it can feel the opposite where it's like, oh my God, okay, we're all numb to this. And how are we still here? But there's been a lot of that has been changing, um, a lot for me, which, yeah, that's been surprising.
that's really great to hear. Thanks for sharing because that it can sometimes feel like that, and it's like, oh, nice. No, and I have to say, I agree. In the podcast, I mean, there's so many people willing to talk about this, and it's happening. It's for sure. Like no one is surprised. Like, wait, new world order. Wait, are we shifting? Is that change happening? That and that maybe a few years back, maybe that would still be like, or even months. Like, people would still question, like, are we really changing? Is there such a big shift happening? Um, so that's very refreshing. That's great to hear. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you see us as a collective, as human beings, or as a planet, as individuals, in 5 to 10 years? You can take perspective as you want.
Yeah, I this is a tough one because where we're headed,
Yeah,
um, I mean, just yesterday I saw that we have we've surpassed all the planetary boundaries at this point. All nine of them. Um, and that's really, really scary. And ways in which we are so reacting to AI and the way that we are just putting everything into building data centers, and building up security infrastructure geopolitically. I mean,
yeah,
that is a really scary future. That being said, it is also really easy to see and experience a different future of one that is much more localized, one that is, balanced, one that is just. But
yeah,
I think I don't know where we're going to go. It's very clear that there are two paths, um, and we have to continue doing the work, um, to go down the latter one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So What is that latter one, and what is the new world in the making for you then?
The new world in the making is life-centered. It is where we're in the right relationship with nature and with one another. Um, it's dynamic. It's beautiful. Um, it is natural. It is reciprocal. It is community centered and focused. Um, and it is one that enables a healthy life and flourishing for all.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Before we go to the last question, would you like to announce where you're going to be speaking, how how people can contact you, and how people can attend the forum of the House of Beautiful Business?
Yeah. So if you can, anyone is invited. Yeah, there are tickets. If you look up the World Beautiful Business Forum, that will be taking place in Athens on May 7th to 10th this year.
Perfect. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And we still have one more question that is, as you already know, leaving a question for the listener to reflect, to ask themselves, what would you like to leave them with?
I offer the invitation of how can you create a moment of glimmer in someone else's day?
Someone else's day. Amazing.
Yeah. And
How
your
can,
day. They go hand in hand. But
okay,
how can we create more moments of glimmer?
great. Can I ask you what kind of glimmer did you have today?
A moment of glimmer I had today was, and this goes back to that other question of just what has surprised me recently. There have been really beautiful small moments of social solidarity, just that awareness of who's around you, and that more like, looking out for one another instead of always being glued to our phones. Um, but a moment of glimmer. I'm in Athens and it's a really nice spring day. Um, and I was walking down the street and I just got the most beautiful whiff of orange blossom. And so that was special.
That's a beautiful one.
What about you?
I can resonate with that too. With both what you just said, with the social aspect, I went to the cafe I almost go every day, and it had been one of the barista's birthday, and I didn't know about that, and that was very nice connection moment, and yeah, as well as like just connecting socially with just very special individuals, where you don't have to really know all their lives. It's just really, really nice to share those moments and be like, oh, human to human, hello, we're alive. It's very beautiful.
It's about seeing and being seen, and we need.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you so much, Melina. I
Thank you,
really
Adriana.
love to have another recording with you. And
Yeah, this was really special. Thank you.
It was really, really special. Thank you so much.